Hey guys, today we're going to be explaining noise gates and compressors for your microphone. Many of you guys have probably heard what these are or what they might do, but I wanted to give you a little bit of help and explain how you can set up your own noise gate and you can set up your own compressor based off of the way that you've set up your mic. So I've already done the video on how to set up your appropriate mic gain, either using a mixer or Audacity. Today, I'm going to show you how you can use Audacity's tools in order to monitor your microphone, determine the appropriate level for a noise gate based off of your background noise, and then ultimately set up a compressor based off of how loud your normal talking is versus where you may peak during screams or anything like that in order to make sure that your quality is as good as you can get. So what we're going to do here is I'm actually recording this video on two separate systems right now. I'm recording one that has a noise gate involved, one that has no noise gate involved, one that has compressor involved, and one that has no compressor involved. Now, I'm using Audacity here, but Audacity is as a tool for recording your voice, and the tools within Audacity usually let you process your voice post-recording. So that means after you record it, you can then apply all these different things on it and you're good to go. If you're a streamer, a podcaster, you want to do those things live so that your voice sounds as good as it can possibly sound to your stream, to your podcast, whatever it needs to be. Luckily, if you are a streamer or you're a podcaster, there's a lot of tools that are out there either externally or within a program called OBS that allows you to set those things up. So the very first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually just record about 10 seconds of me not talking so that we can get the spectrum analyzed of exactly what our volume is of noise to our system. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit the record button. I'm not going to talk for 10 seconds, and then I'm going to show you a tool within Audacity that'll help us set the noise gate limit for our OBS settings. So here we go. All right, we've recorded our 10 seconds. Now, when you first take a look at this line, you look like, oh, wow, there's no noise on the line at all. It looks very, very low in terms of our noise floor. I'm going to go ahead and play this back, and you guys are going to actually hear the noise, and then we'll zoom in, and you can actually see what that noise looks like when we zoom in on the spectrum. Kind of weird, right? So if you go over here and you left click, you can actually zoom in, and you'll see that we have this standard noise that's on the signal itself. Every microphone has this. There's no getting around it. You could isolate your room with a bunch of foam padding to help eliminate it. But frankly, we all probably sit in a room that has either an air conditioner, a fan. We're doing this on a PC. Those certainly have fans. And there just may be excess noise. Now, of course, if you're in a room that has tile or hardwood floor, you're going to get a lot more noise, or the noise that exists is going to be more decibels as it bounces off and gets into your microphone. So some of the things you may want to do is put a rug in your room, put some noise dampening foam in the room, or even just find a way that you can create basically more angles in the room so that sound doesn't bounce off and reverberate so easily. So in a typical post-processing system, you would highlight a sector of the noise, go to Effect, go to Noise Removal. You're going to get this noise profile, try to get the system to understand what the noise is. It's now gotten the profile, select your effect, and then you go to Noise Removal, and it'll reduce that noise depending on what your settings were. What we're going to do is we're going to use another tool in Audacity under the Analyze tab called Plot Spectrum. Now, what I've essentially done here, or what this tool does, is it plots all the frequencies that are picked up by the recorded sound that you just had. And it tells you the level in which those sounds came through on your line. So this is key that you don't adjust your gain, because if you turn your gain up, then the noise level is going to be higher. So that's why you set your mic gain first and then you determine your noise gate. So here what we're going to do, we see our minus 57 dB, and there's actually some excess above this. It looks like there's a peak somewhere around here that we can't exactly see. You see down on the peak below that this happens, seems to be around minus 55 dB. And minus 55 dB is going to be the key when we go to set up our noise gate in OBS. So what I've done here is I've opened up just a standard OBS. This is just a test scene that I've set up, and I've set up my microphone on the same exact line that I would set up for my stream. What I'm going to go ahead and do here is click on Settings, go to Filters, and this is not normally here, so I'm going to add it. We're going to add noise gate, click OK, and now we have to determine these variables that we can adjust. So the open threshold is the first one that's important. You remember from our spectrum that we saw that about minus 55 dBs is where the noise peaked out. So what I traditionally like to do is go 10 dBs above that to set our open threshold. And what that means is that we are setting the amount of signal that's coming into the microphone when the microphone signal physically opens up and will broadcast the signal to the source. Now we need to determine the close threshold. It's important to always have your close threshold about 5 dBs less than your open threshold. That way, the closed threshold is not opening the open threshold, and vice versa. This is something in the industry called chatter. So I like to do it about 5. And of course, with the closed threshold, I want to make sure it's still above where we were in terms of our noise. Now we go into the next things. We have attack time. Attack time is basically how quick do you want the noise gate to release once it gets over that signal level. So we want it to release very, very fast. So in this case, I choose 10 milliseconds. The faster you have it, the quicker the processing needs to take place. And 10 milliseconds seems to be about fine. Now, once you've opened the signal, you need to determine how long the microphone is going to stay open. I also like to keep that to a minimum just in case it's a quick noise. If you get over your open threshold and then stop talking, you want that noise to not really be heard. And in order to do that, I put the hold time very low at 10 milliseconds. The release time is how quickly does the signal itself turn the microphone noise gate back on. So again, I want this to be quick. If we're talking about a live broadcast and there is some background noise on your signal, then what you're going to want to do is have that noise shut off as quick as possible so that your microphone is not sitting there broadcasting background noise over top of, say, a cutscene of your video game play or whatever it happens to be. So I set that default at 10. You can play around with it, whatever works best for you. But that's exactly where I set it. And then we go from there. So now you see when I'm talking, the microphone signal is going through perfectly. I'm going to go ahead and stop real quick, and you're going to see that our signal that used to have noise on it will no longer be picked up to this point. There's the microphone that shut off. You see the microphone signal dropped off. It fell off the face of the planet. And then there's no noise that's being broadcast out to your stream. You can continue to mess with this. If you notice that one day you have a fan on and you want to have the noise gate set a bit higher, go ahead and do so. If you have a very quiet room, everything's all shut off, and you want to make it a little bit lower, you can go ahead and adjust that as well. My recommendation is to learn what the noises are that are going to be presented to your room and do that to its maximum. So right now I have my window open maximum. Outside of perhaps a car driving by or something right now, essentially the noise has been removed via the noise gate. So now we're going to hop over to the next step, which would be compression. All right, guys, we are here to talk now about compression. Compression is the next tool within live voice processing that really helps you make sure that the sound quality that you're giving to your audience is going to be consistent, and really making sure that even in moments of excitement, moments where something may happen that's excessively loud or excessively quiet, depending on how you use compression, will be captured and appropriately sent at the right level to your audience. And so it's almost like a way of saying that compressors can be used to raise the audio of something in the background. So if you're moving away from your mic a little bit, you may get a little bit of that inverse square law coming into play. Or if you scream really loud, especially if you're a live streamer, because something exciting happens, you got scared, something like that, you don't want to make your audience deaf. And compression itself is a tool that allows you to normalize exactly what that is. Now, it's important to set your compression appropriately so that you're not amplifying or compressing the wrong signals. And that's really key here. Specifically more about the background noise, because what compression does will take a full signal, bring the lows up and the highs down, and in doing so, you can sometimes get some unwanted background noise. At the same time, you're reducing the effect of what happens when you scream to your audience. So similar to the noise gate that we just did, the very first thing that we're going to do to try to determine our appropriate compression levels is we're going to go ahead and analyze a spectrum, but this time, rather than being silent, we're going to go ahead and do it while we're talking at normal levels. When we're talking at normal levels, this is going to give us the idea of where our normal conversation voice is going to be had. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is start a recording. Just go ahead and talk over it for a short period of time, about 10 seconds. Use some test 1, 2, 3s, some checks, try to find out where we're going to be talking to. Now we have our 10 seconds of audio. We're going to go ahead and highlight the audio with our highlight tool here. We're going to go to Analyze and we're going to go to Plot Spectrum. From here, it's going to tell me what the decibel level is of the conversation that I was just having. You see here that we are roughly about minus 28 dB. Now, what I like to do with compression is a little bit different than others. You can kind of see from this chart that we are about, I would say about minus 48 dB to minus 28 dB in terms of where our signal really is. So a very aggressive compression would say go to about, I would say about minus 50 dB is where you would start your compression. My fear is with most compression going that low, if you're going to be quite aggressive with it to try to bring these highs up to the same level and bring these other highs down, or these high frequencies that are low in terms of the decibel, bring them up, bring these low frequencies that are high decibel down. My problem with an aggressive compression is that we just set up our noise gate to be about 45 or 50 decibels. And so sometimes in those scenarios, you can actually pick up some background noise and aggressively compress them into your main signal. And that's not something that you want to do. So what I like to do is do something a little bit less aggressive. And what we're going to try to do is pull these low frequency signals down so that they're in closer proximity to where our high frequency signals are on the decibel range. So in order to do this, you see down, if I put my little cursor here where we see this peak right around 130 hertz, 150 hertz on the spectrum, you can see down below that this is minus 28.4 decibels. So now we can go into OBS. I accidentally closed out. Uh-oh. Work. There we go. We're going to go into OBS. We're going to click on our settings wheel and we're going to go to filters. So you see the noise gate that we established with the open threshold of minus 45. We have our closed threshold of minus 50. So I want my compressor to be above that, but not so much that it doesn't capture the spectrum that we looked at here. So I'm going to look right around here, right around 33 decibels is I think where we want our compressor to open up, which means anything right around where my cursor is now that's above this line, anything that's above my cursor will be reduced. That's what a compressor does. And so what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to add the filter. We're going to click on compressor. You can name it whatever you want. I don't know why you would choose anything other than compressor, and then go from there. So here we're going to bring our threshold. So this is basically what you're defining in your threshold for a compressor is where do you want the compressor to start compressing in terms of its decibels? We said minus 33 based off of our spectrum. So there we go. We've established exactly what the threshold is for the reduction. Now we need to determine the ratio. So what the ratio is anything that's over 33 dBs, where we've established that we want that threshold to be, it will reduce the signal that's above it by whatever your ratio is. So for example, if we set a 10-to-1 ratio, it will reduce this peak that's above 33 tenfold to bring it back down. Now 10 is quite aggressive. 10 doesn't really allow you or won't capture some of the excitement that you want to present. It will bring those flat down. And even though you may be screaming on camera or screaming because of whatever situation, it's not going to sound like you're screaming as much given the fact that it's reduced. So where I find to be a sweet spot is if you're not a very aggressive screamer, would probably be about 3.5 or 4. If you're a crazy aggressive screamer and you have just a penetrating scream, I would go with something like 5.5 or 6. I've found that my sweet spot is around 5. I traditionally like to start with 5, and if I do notice that I scream, I'm scared during stream or something like that, something crazy happens, I'll go back and take a listen to it and say, hey, you know what? Can I first establish that I am screaming, so it's a little bit of a louder noise above the threshold that we defined, but can I also establish the fact that I'm not blowing out my audience's ears? So I've found that for me, the way that I scream and the way that my spectrum exists, I find about 5. In general, I think most people are going to find between 3.5 and 6 is their wheelhouse. You may need to go more than that if you have either a high-pitched scream that's much different from your voice, or like a roaring type of a growl type scream on the opposite end where your voice is more mid-tones or high-pitched. So the next couple settings that we're going to go ahead and set is our attack and our release. Again, with the compression specifically, because our compressor in this case is set not so aggressively and more for the scream aspect, we want it to happen very fast, meaning we want the compressor to turn on very, very fast after it hits that threshold, how quickly we can get up and limit that. So I like to set it at about 10 milliseconds. The release in this instance doesn't matter so much. I tend to like a release to be a lot faster so that it gets back to my normal voice as quick as possible. But again, the faster you have the release, the more processing power you may require. So I would leave it probably between 25 and 50. 50 milliseconds is no problem whatsoever. Output gain, I wouldn't touch this at all. Given that we set our mic gain very early on, there's really no reason why we would ever need to set this. So now you have it. You've set up your mic gain in the first video. You've set up your noise gate, and now you're setting up your compressor. By doing these things, you're going to get the best out of your voice that you can possibly get, which limits peaking or clipping, and is going to eliminate as much background noise as possible so that when you're talking into your microphone, talking to your audience, you're going to get a very voice-forward broadcast to your audience. Guys, thank you. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I can further explain this. There's other things that you could do to make your voice sound different, but it's very subjective, and I prefer to try to stay away from those subjective type videos because it really is either how the voice is presented to the microphone, meaning what do you actually sound like, the environment that you're in, how good is your room for audio picking up or reverberations, and then lastly, it all depends on how it sounds to you. You have to remember that sound itself is very subjective to the person that's listening. So someone who thinks that they have a good mic and sounds great to them, it may sound very, very terrible to somebody else simply because of how we pick up audio and it's all interpreted. Guys, thank you so much again. I will talk to you all later.